6 a.m., Karen screaming, my wife putting handcuffs on her. My coffee was still hot. How does a parking dispute end with your HOA president getting arrested? Well, turns out harassing a sheriff's deputy for 6 months straight isn't the power move Karen thought it was. Karen Whitmore ruled Pinewood Estates like her own personal kingdom, clipboard in hand, measuring our driveway at dawn like some demented surveyor. She'd already driven out 3 families with her harassment campaigns, and we were supposed to be number 4. Big mistake. See, while Karen was busy stalking my wife Maya and making criminal threats about people who don't belong here, she had no idea Maya sleeps with a badge under her pillow. 6 months of systematic harassment, property liens, fake violations, and midnight surveillance, all documented by someone who arrests people for a living. The taste of justice that morning? Better than the coffee. What's the craziest power trip your HOA has ever pulled? Drop your story below, but I bet yours didn't end in handcuffs. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. My name's Jake Morrison. I'm 42, been fixing cars my whole life, and I own a small auto repair shop here in Corona, California. My wife Maya, she's 38, been with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for 15 years, specializes in domestic disputes. Funny how that expertise would come in handy later. We moved into Pinewood Estates about 18 months ago. Nice middle-class neighborhood, modest 3-bedroom house, nothing fancy but perfect for what we needed. See, Maya works swing shifts, sometimes rolling in at 2, 3, even 6 in the morning, and we needed somewhere quiet where the neighbors wouldn't complain about late-night arrivals, or so we thought. Maya drives this unmarked sedan, looks like any other car, nothing flashy. Me, I've got a 2015 Ford F-250 work truck with a ladder rack and my tools. It's my personal vehicle, but yeah, I use it for the shop sometimes. Both vehicles registered to our home address, everything legal and above board. Enter Karen Whitmore. 54 years old, been the HOA president for 8 years running, and retired from being an insurance adjuster. You know the type, the kind who specialized in finding reasons to deny claims. Karen's got this perfect house across the street, manicured lawn that looks like it belongs in a magazine, decorative flags for every season, and security cameras pointed in directions that definitely aren't just watching her own property. The morning of our first encounter, I was loading tools into my truck when Karen approached with her clipboard and tape measure. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with her overpowering floral perfume hit me like a wall. She had this superior attitude, like she was doing me some kind of favor by even talking to me. "This is a residential neighborhood, not a construction zone," she announced, pointing at my truck. I figured maybe there'd been some misunderstanding. "Ma'am, this is my personal vehicle. I live here." She pulled out these laminated rule sheets, crisp and cold to the touch. Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws clearly states no commercial vehicles over 6,000 pounds permitted in residential driveways. Now, I'm a reasonable guy. I asked to see the full bylaws, explained that the truck was registered to my home address, used for personal transportation. Karen wasn't having any of it. "Rules are rules," she said, already scribbling on her clipboard. "You have 48 hours to comply or face fines." What really got my attention was how she kept taking photos, not just of my truck, but of Maya's car, our license plates, even noting down what times Maya came and went. The sound of sprinklers hitting concrete filled the uncomfortable silence as I realized this woman had been watching us. Maya was sleeping after a long night shift, completely unaware that our new neighbor had apparently appointed herself the unofficial sheriff of Pinewood Estates. Ironic, considering the real sheriff was snoring softly in our bedroom. That evening, when I told Maya about the encounter, she barely looked up from her coffee. "Honey, I deal with actual criminals all day. This is just paperwork." But I could see something in her cop instinct starting to stir when I mentioned Karen's photo taking and the way she'd been monitoring our routines. Maya's dealt with enough domestic situations to recognize obsessive behavior when she sees it. "Let me guess," Maya said, that professional tone creeping into her voice. "She targeted us because we're new, because we don't fit whatever image she has of the right kind of neighbors?" She was more right than either of us knew at the time. The next morning, there it was in our mailbox. An official HOA violation notice. Not just one, but 3 separate citations. Commercial vehicle violation with a $150 fine, unapproved parking for Maya's sedan being in our own driveway past 10 p.m., and my personal favorite, landscape maintenance deficiency because we had dandelions in the back corner of our yard. Maya took one look at those notices and her expression changed. 15 years of law enforcement will teach you to spot harassment when you see it. Jake, she said quietly, this isn't about parking violations. This is about control. Time for me to do something I probably should have done before buying the house, actually read the HOA covenants. All 47 pages of mind-numbing legal jargon that I'd signed off on without a second thought. Maya made a fresh pot of coffee at 3 a.m. and we spread those documents across our kitchen table like we were planning a military operation. Here, Maya said, highlighting a section with her yellow marker. Commercial Vehicle Rules Section 4.7. But look at this. Amendment 3B has an exemption clause. She was right. Buried on page 31 was language that clearly stated, personal vehicles used occasionally for work purposes are exempt, provided they maintain primary residence registration and do not conduct commercial activities on premises. My truck qualified, Maya's sedan definitely qualified. We were in compliance. The unapproved parking citation was even more bogus. The original documents had no time restrictions for parking in your own driveway. Karen had apparently invented that rule out of thin air. I drafted an email to the HOA board, citing specific bylaw sections, requesting a hearing per Article 12 dispute resolution procedures. Professional, but firm. I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding our compliance with community standards. Karen's response came faster than a speeding ticket. She called an emergency board meeting, and here's where it gets interesting. Only 3 of the 5 board members showed up. Harold Finch, the treasurer, and Margaret Vance, the secretary. No proper notice, no quorum, definitely no legal authority to change anything. But that didn't stop them from voting to pass an emergency amendment, closing what Karen called commercial vehicle loopholes. The smell of desperation was stronger than Harold's aftershave. Here's a knowledge nugget for you. HOA amendments require 30-day advance notice to all homeowners and a proper quorum vote to be legally binding. What Karen did was about as legal as a $3 bill. Within 24 hours, another citation appeared in our mailbox, failure to comply with amended regulations. This woman was either incredibly ignorant of HOA law or banking on us being too intimidated to fight back. I decided to do some neighborhood reconnaissance. Bob Martinez lives 2 houses down, retired high school teacher, been in the neighborhood for 12 years. When I knocked on his door, his face lit up like I'd just offered him a winning lottery ticket. "Oh, you're getting the Karen treatment too," Bob chuckled, inviting me in. "Welcome to the club nobody wants to join." Turns out, I wasn't special. Karen had been systematically targeting newer residents for months. Bob showed me a thick folder of complaints from neighbors. Lisa Chen, the nurse who lives across from Bob, had been cited for excessive children's toys in her backyard. A veteran named Rodriguez got hit for having a motorcycle. Always the same pattern. Newer residents, working-class families, anyone who didn't drive a BMW. She's been gunning for anyone who doesn't fit her idea of neighborhood standards, Bob explained, air quotes and all. 3 families have moved away rather than deal with her harassment. The crunch of footsteps on gravel outside made us both look up. There was Karen pow-walking past Bob's house with her clipboard, taking photos of his mailbox placement and trash can positioning. The woman was conducting surveillance like she was running a private investigation business. When Maya got home that night and found me surrounded by HOA documents and neighbor testimonies, she poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. Even exhausted from a 10-hour shift dealing with actual crimes, she could see this was about more than parking spaces. "This is systematic harassment," she said, using that calm, analytical tone she gets when she's in cop mode. "Pattern behavior targeting specific demographics. I've seen this before." "What do you mean?" "Domestic abusers use the same tactics. Isolate the victim, overwhelm them with bureaucracy, make them feel like they're crazy for fighting back. Karen's just doing it through HOA rules instead of personal relationships." Maya agreed to attend the upcoming HOA hearing as my supportive spouse. She didn't reveal her profession, but I could see her cop brain already working, cataloging evidence, spotting the holes in Karen's authority. That night, the sound of heels clicking on our sidewalk woke us both up. Maya peered through the bedroom blinds and saw Karen conducting what she called her midnight inspection walk, shining a flashlight at our vehicles, making notes on that ever-present clipboard. "Jake," Maya whispered, "document everything. Dates, times, photographs, whatever this is, it's just getting started." She was right about that too. The HOA hearing was scheduled for Karen's house. First red flag right there. Conducting official business in someone's personal residence is an intimidation tactic straight out of the playground bully handbook. Maya and I showed up with a folder full of documentation, ready to present our case like civilized adults. Karen answered the door wearing what I can only describe as corporate battle armor, navy blazer, perfectly pressed slacks, and that condescending smile that screams, "I'm about to ruin your day." The living room was set up like a courtroom, with Karen behind a mahogany desk and 2 folding chairs positioned like we were defendants. Harold Finch sat to her right, nervously adjusting his thick glasses, and Margaret Vance to her left, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. The whole setup felt more like an interrogation than a community dispute resolution. "This is a legal proceeding, not a social hour," Karen announced before we'd even sat down. Maya settled into her chair with that calm, observant demeanor she gets when she's professionally evaluating a situation. I didn't know it then, but she was already cataloging procedural violations and behavioral red flags. Karen opened with her evidence, printed photos of my truck, Maya's car, timestamps showing arrival and departure times. She'd been conducting surveillance like we were suspects in a criminal investigation. "Multiple anonymous complaints have been filed," Karen declared, shuffling through papers with theatrical precision. "Residents are concerned about the declining standards in our community." I asked to see these anonymous complaints. Karen's face flushed slightly. "That information is confidential for the protection of the complainants." Translation: they didn't exist. I presented our documentation, the original HOA bylaws with exemption clauses highlighted, proof of proper vehicle registration, evidence that Karen's emergency amendment violated the HOA's own procedural requirements. Maya sat quietly, but I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Then Karen pulled out her ace, an updated property survey showing that my truck allegedly encroached on a utility easement, constituting a city code violation. That's when Maya spoke up for the first time. "Ma'am, could I see the documentation for that survey?" Karen bristled. "Who are you to demand anything? This is between the homeowner and the HOA board." Big mistake. Maya's expression shifted into what I now recognize as her professional law enforcement mode. "I'm asking because property surveys are legal documents. If there's a boundary dispute, it should be properly documented." "Some people don't understand how civilized neighborhoods operate," Karen snapped, and the temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Maya's eyes narrowed. She'd spent 15 years dealing with domestic disputes, and she knew discriminatory language when she heard it. Karen, oblivious to the fact that she was digging her own grave, doubled down. "Maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for certain types." The silence that followed was deafening. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Margaret stared at her hands. And Maya? Maya was mentally writing up an incident report. I requested a 48-hour recess to consult legal representation. Karen agreed with obvious smugness, probably thinking she'd intimidated us into hiring expensive lawyers for a parking dispute. "Good luck finding an attorney for this petty nonsense," she called after us as we left. In the car, Maya was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Jake, she just committed potential fraud with that fake survey." "What do you mean?" "Property surveys are official documents. Falsifying boundary information to support harassment can be prosecuted as fraud in California. And those discriminatory comments? That elevates this from civil to criminal territory." Maya explained that she'd been mentally documenting everything: the procedural violations, the intimidation tactics, the potential document fraud. Her cop instincts were in full gear now. "This isn't about parking anymore," she said. "This is about someone using a position of authority to harass people she considers undesirable." As we pulled into our driveway, Bob Martinez approached from across the street. He'd been waiting for us, holding a manila folder that looked suspiciously similar to the one we'd brought to the meeting. "How'd it go?" he asked, though our expressions probably told the whole story. "About as well as a root canal," I replied. Bob nodded grimly. "Karen's done this before. 3 families moved away after similar harassment campaigns. She targets veterans, minorities, working-class families, anyone who doesn't drive a BMW or work in an office." He handed me the folder. Property records, HOA financial statements, documentation of her previous harassment campaigns. I've been collecting evidence for months, waiting for someone willing to fight back. That night, Maya spread Bob's evidence across our kitchen table alongside our own documentation. The pattern was undeniable. Karen had been systematically targeting specific demographics, using HOA rules as weapons of harassment. "Jake," Maya said, highlighting sections with her yellow marker, "this woman has been running a textbook discrimination campaign. The only question is whether she's smart enough to stay within civil boundaries or stupid enough to cross into criminal territory." As if on cue, the sound of heels clicking on concrete echoed from outside. Maya peered through the blinds and saw Karen conducting another late-night inspection, this time with Harold in tow, both of them pointing at our house and taking notes. "Document everything," Maya repeated, "because I have a feeling she's about to make this a law enforcement matter." Karen's next move was straight out of the totalitarian playbook. Daily inspections with her clipboard and camera. Every morning, like clockwork, there she was, measuring our driveway, photographing our vehicles, making notes with the dedication of a crime scene investigator. The real problem started when she began timing these inspections to Maya's sleep schedule. Maya works nights, which means she needs to sleep during the day. Karen would park herself outside our house right around noon, talking loudly on her phone, clicking her heels on the sidewalk like a one-woman percussion section. Then came the certified letter, thick, official-looking envelope threatening to place a lien on our property for cumulative violations and failure to comply with community standards. Here's a knowledge nugget. HOA liens must follow specific legal procedures and can't be placed arbitrarily for made-up violations. Karen was essentially threatening us with a legal action she had no authority to pursue. The harassment was taking its toll. Maya, who normally handles stress like a Zen master, was getting increasingly frustrated with the sleep disruption. When someone who deals with actual criminals for a living starts losing sleep over a neighbor with a clipboard, you know the situation has crossed a line. That's when things got personal. I walked out to my truck one morning and found scratches along the paint and 2 nails strategically placed near the rear tires. No direct proof, but the timing was suspiciously coincidental with our HOA confrontation. Maya took one look at the damage and said, "Time for security cameras." We installed a basic system that weekend, and good thing, too. The very next morning at 6:47 a.m., our cameras caught Karen prowling around our property with a tape measure, apparently documenting the exact distance between our truck and the property line. "This is stalking behavior," Maya observed, reviewing the footage over her morning coffee. "Pattern harassment with surveillance elements. I've arrested people for less." That afternoon, while Maya was trying to sleep, Karen escalated again. She filed a complaint with county code enforcement, claiming we were operating a commercial automotive repair business from our residence. Complete fiction, but enough to trigger an official inspection. Maya's professional instincts kicked into overdrive. Using public records, she discovered Karen had lived in 3 different neighborhoods over the past decade. In each location, property records showed rapid turnover in houses near hers. "Jake," Maya said, spreading printouts across our table, "she's a serial harasser. This is her pattern. Move into a neighborhood, gain HOA power, systematically harass people until they leave." The code enforcement inspection was a comedy of errors. Inspector Rodriguez showed up while I was at work and Maya was sleeping. Karen was there to guide him, pointing out supposed evidence of commercial activity. Rodriguez found exactly nothing wrong. He even noted in his report Karen's unusual level of involvement in what should have been a routine inspection. When Karen realized the inspector wasn't going to rubber stamp her complaints, she became belligerent. "There are clear violations here. Are you people blind?" Rodriguez maintained professional dignity while essentially telling Karen to mind her own business. The taste of defeat must have been bitter for someone used to getting her way through intimidation. That evening, Maya started documenting everything with law enforcement precision. Dates, times, photographic evidence, witness statements from neighbors. She was building a case file without explicitly saying so. "If this continues escalating," she said, organizing documents with military efficiency, "we'll need proper evidence for whatever comes next." The final straw came when Karen threatened to have Maya's car towed from our own driveway. She claimed overnight parking violated emergency vehicle access requirements, a rule that existed nowhere in any HOA document. "Our driveway on our property," I pointed out. Karen's response was pure arrogance. "We'll see what the sheriff thinks about obstruction of emergency services." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. That night, Maya made a decision. "Jake, I can't let this continue affecting your mental health and our quality of life." She's crossed from civil harassment into behavior that could constitute criminal activity. I insisted on handling it civilian to civilian first. I didn't want to use Maya's authority unless absolutely necessary. Maya agreed but set a clear boundary. If she commits actual crimes in my presence, I intervene professionally. As we talked, the familiar sound of heels on concrete echoed outside. Karen and Harold were conducting another late-night surveillance mission, this time with what looked like measuring equipment. Maya watched them through the blinds, her expression shifting into cop mode. "Document everything, Jake, because I think she's about to hand us exactly what we need." While Karen was busy playing neighborhood dictator, I decided to do some detective work of my own. Late one night, fueled by frustration and strong coffee, I dove deep into public records and court documents. What I found made my blood run cold. Karen Whitmore had been involved in 3 separate lawsuits in her previous neighborhoods. Not as a victim, as the instigator. Each case followed the same pattern: systematic harassment of specific neighbors, escalating complaints. Then mysteriously, those families would sell their homes at below-market prices. Here's where it gets interesting. Harold Finch, our HOA treasurer, has a real estate license. And guess who bought several of those distressed properties in Karen's previous neighborhoods? Companies linked to Harold's real estate network. The smell of corruption was stronger than day-old fish. I pulled property tax records and discovered Karen had refinanced her house 3 times in the past 5 years. Her current mortgage payments were significantly higher than similar properties in the area. She was over-leveraged and desperate for cash flow. Maya's friend in county records? Really? Maya, using her professional access during her shift, helped piece together the financial puzzle. Harold's real estate transactions coincided perfectly with Karen's harassment campaigns. When families fled the neighborhood, Harold's associates swooped in with lowball offers. "Jake," Maya said, studying the documents spread across our kitchen table, "this isn't random harassment. This is a coordinated scheme to manipulate property values and force profitable sales." We'd stumbled onto what law enforcement calls a real estate fraud ring. Maya recognized the pattern from white-collar crime cases she'd seen. Karen would identify target families, usually newer residents, minorities, working-class families, then systematically harass them until they became desperate to sell. Harold would either buy directly through shell companies or steer distressed sales to his network, profiting from both sides of the transaction. But the smoking gun was in the HOA financial records that Bob had obtained. The reserve fund was nearly $30,000 below what California law requires HOA communities to maintain. Where had that money gone? Buried in the treasurer's reports were dozens of payments to companies linked to Harold's real estate business. Maintenance contracts, consulting fees, emergency repairs, all going to Harold's network at inflated prices. Maya's cop brain was in full gear now. This qualifies for federal investigation under civil rights statutes. Using HOA authority to target specific demographics for financial gain crosses into racketeering territory. Here's a crucial knowledge nugget. California Civil Code 5975 specifically addresses HOA harassment and provides for serious penalties including attorney fees and punitive damages. Karen had violated multiple sections. The insurance connection suddenly made sense too. Karen's background as an insurance adjuster had taught her how to create paper trails and overwhelm people with bureaucracy. She was using those same tactics to force families out of their homes for profit. "She's running a con game," Maya said, highlighting sections of the civil code, using HOA rules as cover for a systematic real estate fraud scheme. We realized we weren't just dealing with a power-hungry neighbor. We were looking at organized criminal activity that had probably displaced dozens of families over several years. The security camera footage of Karen and Harold conducting late-night property measurements took on new significance. They weren't just harassing us, they were evaluating our property for potential acquisition. Maya made the strategic decision to let Karen continue her harassment campaign while we built an airtight case. If we move too early, she'll lawyer up and destroy evidence. But if she escalates to actual criminal behavior in my presence... She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew Karen's arrogance and desperation would eventually lead her to cross a line she couldn't uncross. "Jake," Maya said, organizing our evidence into professional case file format, "we're not just fighting for a parking space anymore. We're fighting for every family she's driven out and every family she's planning to target next." Time to turn defense into offense. Maya and I decided to host what we called a neighborhood barbecue, really a strategy meeting disguised as a social gathering. The smell of grilled burgers and the sound of casual conversation would provide perfect cover for planning Karen's downfall. 7 families showed up, each carrying more than just potato salad. Bob Martinez brought 40 years of teaching experience in conflict resolution. Lisa Chen contributed a medical professional's attention to detail and documentation. The Rodriguez family, the veteran with the motorcycle Karen had targeted, brought military organizational skills. We spread everything out on our back patio table: photos, documents, timelines, financial records. It looked like a detective's evidence board, complete with string connecting various pieces of the puzzle. Maya, still maintaining her civilian cover, guided the group through proper evidence preservation techniques. Everything needs dates, times, witnesses, she explained, not mentioning she'd learned this from 15 years of building criminal cases. Photos should include timestamps and keep original documents separate from copies. Bob's accounting background proved invaluable when we examined the HOA financial statements. "Look at these maintenance contracts," he said, pointing to line items with his reading glasses perched on his nose. Harold's company received $47,000 in no-bid contracts over 2 years. That's embezzlement, hiding in plain sight. Lisa had been keeping meticulous medical records of stress symptoms in her family caused by Karen's harassment: headaches, sleep disruption, anxiety attacks. She documented everything with clinical precision. "This isn't just emotional distress," Lisa explained. "This is measurable health impact from systematic abuse." The technical education portion was like a community college course in fighting corruption. I explained automotive regulations to counter Karen's commercial vehicle nonsense. Maya taught evidence preservation, techniques she'd learned from true crime podcasts. Bob outlined parliamentary procedure violations in HOA meetings. Here's a crucial knowledge nugget. California Corporations Code requires HOAs to follow the same transparency rules as government bodies, including open meetings and financial disclosure. Karen had violated multiple sections. We developed a 3-phase plan. Phase 1, document everything and build community support. Phase 2, present evidence at the next official HOA meeting with full neighborhood attendance. Phase 3, if Karen escalated to criminal behavior, Maya would intervene professionally. The community mobilization effort was impressive. Bob designed flyers announcing the public HOA meeting, carefully wording them to comply with open meeting laws. Lisa organized a phone tree to ensure maximum attendance. I handled the technical aspects, borrowing professional video equipment to record the meeting for evidence. Maya's role was the most delicate. She consulted with the district attorney's office through general inquiries about HOA fraud, without revealing her personal involvement. She also reviewed federal civil rights statutes applicable to housing discrimination, preparing documentation for potential criminal referral. "The key," Maya explained to our group, "is letting Karen hang herself with her own rope. If we push too hard, too fast, she'll lawyer up and disappear. But if we create the right conditions..." Karen, meanwhile, was trying her own counterintelligence. She attempted to cancel the public meeting, claiming security concerns. Harold proposed moving to a smaller venue to limit attendance. Margaret suggested requiring advance registration, classic intimidation tactics. But Bob knew California law. Open meeting requirements can't be circumvented by security claims unless there's genuine threat of violence, he explained, his teacher voice carrying that authority that makes people listen. And attendance can't be restricted for registered homeowners. Our tactical advantages were becoming clear. My mechanical expertise exposed Harold's property violations as complete fiction. Maya's law enforcement experience, though still hidden, helped identify Karen's intimidation patterns. Bob's education background provided meeting facilitation skills. Lisa's medical training documented quantifiable damages. The final preparations felt like organizing a military operation. We had legal observers lined up, media contacts prepared in case the story had broader public interest, and Maya had discreetly arranged for backup law enforcement if things went sideways. "Remember," Maya said during our final planning session, "we're not vigilantes. We're citizens using legal processes to address systematic abuse of authority. Everything we do has to be absolutely above board." The night before the big meeting, we sat on our back patio reviewing our evidence one last time. File folders organized with professional precision, video equipment tested and ready, community support confirmed. Maya looked at the stack of documentation we'd assembled, hundreds of pages proving Karen's harassment scheme and financial fraud. Jake, whatever happens tomorrow, we've already won. Even if Karen somehow talks her way out of immediate consequences, we've exposed her pattern and protected future targets. The taste of anticipation was electric. Karen had spent months trying to intimidate us into submission. Tomorrow, she'd discover that picking a fight with a sheriff deputy in a community of organized neighbors was the biggest mistake of her criminal career. But she didn't know about Maya's profession yet. That revelation was going to be the cherry on top of Karen's public humiliation Sunday. Karen must have sensed something was brewing because her behavior shifted into full panic mode. Through Margaret's loose lips, she'd discovered that the neighborhood was organizing, and her response was straight out of the dictator's playbook: escalate the oppression before the peasants' revolt. She scheduled her own emergency board meeting, attempting to ram through bylaw changes that would essentially criminalize breathing without her permission. The proposed amendments included anti-conspiracy clauses, prohibiting coordinated resistance to lawful HOA authority. Language so ridiculous, it would have been funny if it wasn't so desperate. But Karen's real genius move was going nuclear on all of us simultaneously. She filed complaints with every government agency she could think of: code enforcement, animal control, parking enforcement, environmental health, probably the Coast Guard if she could have figured out a maritime angle. Coordinated violations require immediate intervention, she declared in a memo to the county, claiming our neighborhood had become a hotbed of criminal activity. Harold backed her up with independent verification, though his independence was about as genuine as a $3 bill. The personal attack on my business was where she really showed her true colors. Karen filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau claiming my auto shop was operating unlicensed commercial activity and creating environmental violations. She was trying to destroy my livelihood because I wouldn't bow down to her clipboard tyranny. Maya recognized this escalation immediately. She's moved beyond civil harassment into stalking and economic terrorism, she said, reviewing Karen's latest barrage of complaints. This is the behavior pattern of someone who's lost all rational boundaries. And Maya was right about the stalking part. Karen had begun what she probably thought was covert surveillance, but was actually about as subtle as a mariachi band in a library. She'd park on different streets around our house, taking photographs of our daily routines, noting when we left for work, when we came home, who visited us. Lisa was the first to notice Karen following her teenage daughter to the school bus stop. That crossed a line that even Margaret couldn't rationalize away. When you start stalking children, you've officially graduated from neighborhood nuisance to criminal predator. Maya's professional instincts went into overdrive. She started documenting everything with the precision of someone building a criminal case, because she was. Photos, timestamps, license plate numbers, behavioral observations. Karen didn't realize she was being evaluated by a law enforcement professional who specialized in exactly this type of harassment. The community siege intensified when multiple families received simultaneous violation notices for identical infractions that had never existed before. Karen was demanding access to garages, backyards, even house interiors for compliance inspections. She threatened immediate liens on properties for cumulative violations, a legal fiction that would make a mob lawyer proud. Several neighbors, exhausted by months of harassment, actually considered selling their homes rather than continue fighting. That's when Harold's real estate vulture act kicked into high gear. He started making unsolicited visits to stressed families, offering to buy their homes at below-market prices. Given the difficult neighborhood conditions, he'd say with fake sympathy, selling might be your best option. Maya recognized the coordination immediately. Classic predatory scheme, she explained as we reviewed Harold's purchase offers. Create the crisis, then profit from the desperation. The breaking point came when Karen confronted Maya directly during her sleep hours. At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, Karen started pounding on our front door, demanding entry for an emergency HOA inspection because someone had reported suspicious activity. Maya answered the door in her robe, clearly exhausted from a night shift. Any reasonable person would have apologized and rescheduled. Karen doubled down. "I know you people think you can ignore community standards," Karen announced, trying to push past Maya into our house. Maya's expression shifted into cop mode so fast it was like watching Clark Kent become Superman. Professional training kicked in as she evaluated Karen's aggressive behavior, invasive language, and complete disregard for boundaries. But Maya maintained her cover, documenting everything while appearing to be just an exhausted homeowner. Karen had no idea she was digging her own legal grave with every word. The sabotage discovery happened 3 days later. Jake found sugar in his truck's gas tank, a classic vandalism technique that causes expensive engine damage. Our security cameras caught a figure in dark clothing near the vehicle at 3 a.m., but the image was too dark for positive identification. Maya advised treating it as criminal vandalism and filing a police report. When her colleague responded to take the report, Maya had to carefully balance her professional objectivity with personal involvement. "Ma'am," the responding officer said, "this appears to be part of a larger harassment pattern. Have you considered applying for a restraining order?" Maya smiled grimly. "We're exploring all our legal options, officer." Karen's final desperate move was hiring an attorney to send cease and desist letters to every neighbor who'd attended our barbecue meeting. She claimed defamation and interference with lawful HOA business, threatening individual lawsuits designed to bankrupt anyone who opposed her. The legal intimidation was Karen's biggest mistake yet. Maya knew that frivolous litigation threats could constitute harassment under California law, and Karen had just provided written evidence of her criminal intent. "She's about to find out," Maya said, reviewing the threatening legal letters, that picking a fight with an organized community was the worst decision of her criminal career. Karen's final gambit was pure desperation wrapped in legal theater. She scheduled a competing meeting for the same night as our community gathering, claiming our meeting was illegal due to procedural violations she'd invented on the spot. Her plan was to relocate to her house with limited seating, then declare herself the winner by default. Margaret dutifully sent notices only to known supporters: Harold, a couple of his real estate cronies, and 3 elderly residents. Karen had convinced we were dangerous radicals plotting to destroy property values. But Karen's media manipulation attempt was where her insurance adjuster background really shone. She contacted Channel 7 News, claiming she was the victim of a coordinated harassment campaign by neighborhood extremists. She provided edited documentation that removed all context, making herself look like a concerned citizen under siege. Harold backed her story with independent witness testimony that was about as independent as North Korea's elections. Together, they painted a picture of lawful HOA officials being terrorized by newcomers who refused to follow community standards. Jake's counter-strategy was beautifully simple: ensure our community meeting proceeded at the neutral location with proper legal notice to all homeowners. Bob had researched California open meeting laws thoroughly, and we were bulletproof on procedural requirements. The bribery attempt came Tuesday night when Harold approached Bob privately with a cash offer for his house that was $47,000 above market value. Given the inevitable legal costs of fighting the HOA, Harold suggested with oily concern, selling might save you considerable stress and expense. Bob, bless his teacher's heart, recorded the entire conversation on his phone. Harold had just committed attempted witness intimidation, a felony in California. Maya's investigation skills, still hidden behind her civilian cover, uncovered additional civil lawsuits Karen had filed in other counties. The pattern showed harassment campaigns dating back 8 years, with Karen systematically targeting specific demographics in multiple neighborhoods. "She's not just a serial harasser," Maya told me privately. "She's a career criminal who's been using HOA positions to run real estate fraud schemes for nearly a decade." The false police report was Karen's nuclear option. She filed a complaint claiming I had physically threatened her during our last encounter, providing witness statements from Margaret and Harold that described an incident that never happened. Maya's colleague caught the case, and she found herself in the surreal position of investigating a false report filed against her own husband. Professional ethics required her to recuse herself, but not before ensuring the investigating officer understood the pattern of harassment we'd been documenting. Jake's security cameras provided ironclad alibi for the alleged threat incident. Karen had claimed I confronted her at 3 p.m. on Saturday in our driveway. Camera footage showed I was at the auto shop with 3 customers who could verify my whereabouts. When the investigating officer found no evidence supporting Karen's claims, she became belligerent. "Are you people all in on this conspiracy? I demand to speak to your supervisor." Maya's colleague, a 20-year veteran named Detective Rodriguez, recognized the harassment pattern immediately. Ma'am, filing false reports is a serious offense. I'd recommend being very careful about future accusations. The pre-meeting confrontation happened exactly as Maya had predicted. Karen arrived early with Harold, Margaret, and several people none of us recognized, probably Harold's real estate associates recruited to pack the meeting. Karen attempted to control access to the community center, claiming the room was reserved for official HOA business only. When the facility manager confirmed it was a public rental with equal access, Karen's mask slipped completely. "This is a coordinated attack on legitimate neighborhood leadership," she announced to anyone within earshot. "These people are trying to destroy everything we've built here." Bob's financial investigation had uncovered the smoking gun. Harold's real estate license had expired 6 months ago, making his continued transactions potentially illegal. Maya recognized this as unlicensed practice of real estate, a misdemeanor that could escalate to felony fraud depending on the money involved. Harold's nervous behavior suggested he knew exactly how exposed he was. Financial records showed suspicious transfers between his accounts and Karen's, creating a paper trail that screamed money laundering to anyone with law enforcement experience. Maya's final preparation involved reviewing California Penal Code sections applicable to Karen's escalating behavior. Criminal threats, harassment, filing false reports, conspiracy to commit fraud. Karen had potentially violated multiple statutes. "If she commits any crime in my presence during this meeting," Maya told me that morning, "I'm dropping the Civilian Act and arresting her on the spot." The psychological pressure was clearly affecting both Karen and Harold. Karen's behavior had become erratic and aggressive, while Harold looked like a man who'd realized his get-rich-quick scheme was about to collapse spectacularly. Margaret seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation, suggesting she might be willing to testify truthfully if given immunity from prosecution. The stage was set for a public confrontation that would either reform our HOA through proper democratic processes or expose a criminal conspiracy that had been operating under the cover of community leadership for years. Karen had no idea she was about to face off against a sheriff's deputy who'd been building a criminal case against her for months. The community center was packed tighter than a Black Friday sale, 60-plus residents filling every seat, with people standing along the walls. Karen's face went pale when she saw the turnout. This wasn't the small, controllable gathering she'd expected. Karen tried to seize control immediately, marching to the front of the room like she owned the place. "This meeting is out of order. I am the duly elected HOA president, and I will conduct these proceedings." Bob, armed with his parliamentary procedure handbook, wasn't having it. "Ma'am, this is a community meeting called by homeowners under California Civil Code. You have no authority here unless elected as chair by attendees." The vote wasn't even close. Bob was elected meeting chair by a show of hands that looked like a stadium wave. Karen's supporters, all 5 of them, were outnumbered 12-1. Karen's opening presentation was pure theater. She'd prepared a slideshow titled "Protecting Our Community from Lawless Elements," featuring photos of Jake's truck, Maya's car, and other neighbors' supposed violations. Her voice carried that condescending tone perfected by insurance adjusters denying legitimate claims. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen announced dramatically, "our neighborhood is under siege by people who refuse to follow basic community standards." Errol stepped up with his financial presentation, charts and graphs designed to show how problem residents were costing the HOA money. The numbers looked impressive until you realized they were mostly fabricated. Margaret read from meeting minutes that had been edited so heavily they barely resembled reality. 3 neighbors immediately objected, producing their own recordings that contradicted Margaret's version completely. Then it was our turn. Jake presented the harassment timeline with military precision. Dates, photos, documentation showing Karen's systematic targeting of specific families. The audience gasped as the pattern became undeniable. Elisa followed with medical documentation of stress health problems in multiple families, including her teenage daughter's anxiety attacks caused by Karen's stalking behavior. But the financial bombshell was what really got the crowd's attention. Bob's investigation had uncovered $47,000 in no-bid contracts awarded to Harold's companies, plus evidence that the HOA reserve fund had been systematically depleted through suspicious expenditures. "We thought your HOA fees had been funding their personal enrichment scheme," Bob announced. And the murmur from the audience sounded like an angry beehive. That's when Karen completely lost it. She stood up, pointing an accusatory finger at Jake. You people don't belong in this neighborhood. I don't care what your little investigation claims. Some residents understand quality and standards, and others—" He paused, looking around the room with undisguised contempt. "Others bring down property values just by existing here." Maya had been sitting quietly in the third row, still maintaining her civilian cover, but when Karen's rant escalated to specific threats, everything changed. "I know where you all live, what cars you drive, what time you come and go," Karen shouted, her voice rising to near hysteria. "I will make life hell for anyone who thinks they can challenge legitimate authority." Maya stood up slowly, her expression shifting into that calm, professional demeanor that every criminal learns to fear. "Ma'am," Maya said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent room, "I'm Deputy Sheriff Maya Castellanos with Riverside County, and you just made criminal threats in my presence." The silence was deafening. You could hear a pin drop in that packed community center. Maya pulled out her badge and credentials, holding them high enough for everyone to see. Karen's face went from red to white to green in about 3 seconds, like a broken traffic light. "Furthermore," Maya continued, "I've been documenting your harassment campaign for months, and you've just confessed to stalking and intimidation in front of 60 witnesses." Karen's breakdown was spectacular. She started screaming about police harassment and illegal surveillance, apparently unaware that living in the same neighborhood as a cop isn't a crime. "This is entrapment. You can't use your position to spy on law-abiding citizens." Harold tried to slip out the back, but Maya's partner, Detective Rodriguez, had arrived for backup. She'd texted him when Karen started making threats. "Ma'am," Maya said with professional calm, "you're under arrest for criminal threats, harassment, and filing false police reports." The handcuffs, clicking shut, was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. As Karen was led away, still screaming about conspiracies and illegal surveillance, the crowd burst into applause. Bob immediately called for an emergency vote of no confidence in the current HOA leadership. The vote was unanimous, minus Harold, who was being questioned about financial irregularities, and Margaret, who was crying and offering to cooperate with authorities. Channel 7 News arrived just in time to catch Karen being loaded into a patrol car, creating the viral video that would make HOA Karen, arrested by sheriff she was harassing, trend nationally for 3 days. Jake gave a brief interview about ordinary families standing up to systematic bullying, while Maya professionally declined comment since the case was now under official investigation. Sometimes justice isn't just served, it's served with a side of public humiliation and a felony record. The dominoes fell faster than Karen's credibility. Within 30 days, we held an emergency HOA board election that looked like a complete regime change. Bob was elected president by a landslide, Lisa became treasurer, and in a twist of irony that still makes me smile, the neighbors voted me in as secretary. The guy who couldn't park his truck without causing a constitutional crisis. Our first act was rescinding every single one of Karen's bogus rule changes, her commercial vehicle restrictions, time-based parking violations, and landscape maintenance nitpicking, all gone with a simple majority vote. The taste of bureaucratic justice was sweeter than Maya's morning coffee. Harold's financial house of cards collapsed spectacularly. The district attorney's office launched a full investigation that uncovered 8 years of systematic fraud across multiple neighborhoods. Harold pleaded guilty to real estate fraud, unlicensed practice, and conspiracy charges. His real estate license was permanently revoked, and the civil lawsuit filed by affected neighbors recovered over $15,000 in damages and legal fees. Karen's legal troubles were just beginning. She pleaded guilty to criminal harassment, making criminal threats, and filing false police reports. The judge sentenced her to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and a restraining order prohibiting contact with any Pinewood Estates residents. But here's the beautiful part. The community service had to be performed at a legal aid clinic, helping low-income families fight abusive landlords and HOA harassment. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Maya and I settled back into normal life, which felt like a vacation after months of warfare. Maya's sleep schedule returned to normal without Karen's daily harassment interruptions. My auto shop business actually grew after the publicity, with customers appreciating someone who'd fought back against petty tyranny. Our relationship came out stronger than ever. Working together against a common threat had shown us how well we functioned as a team when the stakes were real. Plus, Maya's colleagues at the sheriff's department never let her forget that she'd literally arrested someone for bothering her husband about parking. A story that became legendary at the station. The neighborhood transformation was remarkable. Our new HOA board instituted monthly transparency meetings, annual financial audits, and a policy requiring all rule changes to be voted on by the full community. Margaret, freed from Karen's influence, became an enthusiastic supporter of democratic governance. The ripple effects spread far beyond Pinewood Estates. Our story inspired similar investigations into HOA corruption across Riverside County. The California legislature even proposed stricter oversight requirements for HOA financial management and dispute resolution procedures. Maya became the unofficial expert on HOA harassment cases within the sheriff's department. Her documentation techniques and evidence preservation methods became training material for other deputies dealing with similar situations. But the real victory was turning our neighborhood into an actual community. We established a scholarship fund using the recovered HOA money, helping local kids attend college. Lisa organized an annual diversity festival that celebrates the different backgrounds Karen had tried to drive away. Bob created a community garden on the formerly contentious common area where Karen used to prowl with her clipboard. The security cameras that we'd installed to catch Karen's harassment became the foundation for a neighborhood watch program, ironically coordinated by Maya's professional expertise. Crime in our area dropped to practically zero when word spread that a sheriff's deputy lived here. Property values actually increased after Karen's departure, proving that community spirit beats fear-based management every time. 3 families that had been considering moving decided to stay, and 2 new families moved in specifically because they'd heard about our successful fight against HOA corruption. 6 months later, Channel 7 did a follow-up story on our community transformation. The contrast between Karen's reign of terror and our current cooperative spirit made for compelling television. National news outlets picked up the story as an example of grassroots justice defeating systematic corruption. Karen's former insurance company even contacted Maya about a pattern of fraudulent claims Karen had filed over the years. Turns out her HOA harassment was practice for a larger insurance fraud scheme that the FBI is still investigating. Sometimes the person being harassed has hidden advantages the bully never expected. Sometimes documentation and community organizing can defeat individual tyranny. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice isn't just served, it's served with a side of poetic irony and a criminal record. Drop a comment with your worst HOA horror story. Trust me, we've all got them. And hit that subscribe button because next week's story involves a city council member who thought bribes were just consulting fees. You won't want to miss that train wreck. Where are you watching from? Let me know if you've ever had to fight back against petty authority, because apparently there's a lot more of us than there are of them.